All right, thank you everybody. Our break has officially come to an end. Welcome back. So this does mark the second half of the debate. So as the candidates were informed, they had 2 rebuttals per half. So you now have 2 rebuttals for the second half of the debate to be used. Just a reminder to everybody, if you do have a question, you can come on up to the table here and submit your question. It can be approved, and then we will call you up when it is time. That being said, we do have our first question of the second half from the floor.
Hi.
We will be starting with Ms. Lang.
So throughout this whole entire debate, I've heard about how you guys are going to go out and reach to students and hear their problems, but I haven't actually heard about how you're actually going to go and turn your words into actions. I'd like to know how you guys plan and what administrative forums you're going to go through to achieve a solution to all these problems you're talking about.
Okay, thanks for the question. That's my sister. I had no idea that was coming. So, essentially, I think it depends on the issue that you're talking about. So I think one important advantage I think that I have is that I know which channels to go through depending on what the issue is. I think that my previous experience has been beneficial in that regard. So if it was financial, for example, we go through the Board of Trustees. And one of the things that I think is important with the Board of Trustees is to understand that by the time that most decisions actually get to the Board of Trustees, the decision's pretty much already been made. They only meet 4 times per year. So a lot of people think, oh good, the Rector sits on the Board of Trustees, look at all these changes that they'll be able to make. But by the time it gets there, your voice really doesn't mean much because they've already made the motion, had a discussion about it, and they put it up. So it's not like AMS Assembly or like AS Assembly where we're actually debating the things right there. The motions come out of discussions. And I think that it's important that the Rector is part of those discussions. And part of that is being proactive. And I think that knowing what the issues are and knowing how they're going to be discussed throughout the administration is really important. And being on the bodies themselves that make those decisions before they go to the board, I think is really important. So one of the things that happened was international tuition fees increased, and everyone came out to the board thinking, okay, we can make a difference here, but it didn't really matter because they'd already decided. And I think that speaking to the administration in terms that they understand, so coming up to them, like I said before, and saying, I understand your perspective, I've communicated that to the students, and this is the compromise that I want to come up with. So instead of saying, no, we don't want international tuition fees raised, we should say, no we don't, here are some alternative revenue sources that we've thought of, or here are some things that you can do. So I think that that's the way to do it, is go through these bodies and speak in a way that they understand.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Robin. I think going through the appropriate bodies is what you're going to have to do. Now, I think saying that is one thing, actually being able to do it's a little bit harder because the administration is massive, it's huge, it's complex. So I think the best way to do it is to understand the administration and figure out what body deals with what. But going further than that, I think knowing where the back doors are and knowing where you can have a little bit more pull than you officially do, or knowing which committees influence others more so. So mapping out the administration, understanding where you have to go with the question, and then going there with it.
All right, thanks for the question. So, as I would agree with these guys, it is going through the bodies. That's one way of doing it for sure. And depending on the issue and the situation, the Rector needs to do adequate research to make sure that they fully understand the issue. Not to the point where they've experienced it as the students experienced it, because they can't experience it the way they have. And they also need to be able to check the feasibility. So if a student comes with an issue to the Rector's office, the Rector should do the work necessary to find out whether or not that's a feasible issue, and then, or there's a feasible solution. And if there is, then maybe bring that student in and actually work with them, or work with the group that is trying to accomplish whatever it is. Now, the Rector being a student voice is a great thing, and I think that is awesome. The Rector gets to sit on the Board of Trustees and the Senate and can sit on many different committees and boards. But again, the Rector is one student still, and even though they represent all students, it really needs, like, real change needs to happen with mobilizing students. If students know about the issues, and if they understand them to some degree, then they'll most of the times they'll be willing to do more research and get more involved because it actually impacts them. One of the things that I outlined in my platform is something as simple, but I think as effective, as a monthly report that basically just outlines the decisions, the changes, and the direction that the university administration is headed, and put that through an email, put it in the journal, through social media, several different mediums, and that just acts as a stepping stone for students so they can learn more about the issues, and then I think there'll be bigger responses, better responses from students, and then we'll actually be able to come up with something collectively to bring to the board. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that Robin is right. It's important to go through the proper channels to get decisions made, talking to board members before board meetings. I think those are all very true things. However, something I am very interested in doing is building strong student support for each issue that comes up. So the rector going up there by themselves and saying, I think this is a problem for students, we should probably deal with it, is not going to have the same impact as if, say we're talking about this environmental retrofits. It would have so much more impact if we said, you know, the CES of the AMS is talking about this, CUSN is talking about this, QBAC is talking about this. You could even bring in Ted Chu and say, you know, he's really passionate about this, he's super committed to environmental things. Bringing in all these groups and building strong support will make it so much more difficult for the administration to ignore than just one student sitting on the board.
Well, to start with, hi Robin's sister. We've actually heard a bit about you whenever discussing the plight of first-year geography students at this school. My condolences. In answer to your question, the best way, or at least my way, of navigating the system, as Robin mentioned, the Board of Trustees does only meet 4 times a year. But it's through the committees you sit on as a member of the Board of Trustees where you get to make a difference. By sitting on the Committee of Finance, I would be pushing and fighting to make sure no further cuts are coming to the classroom so future first-year geography students can have a classroom back with a professor in it instead of sitting at home watching the computer for their lecture. Furthermore, on the nominating committee, I would make sure that prospective members who might be admitted to the Board of Trustees are those who understand the history and the spirit of Queen's University. People who understand what the students of this institution are all about, people who understand our place not just within Ontario, but within the national academic sphere. I would be pushing to make sure that only those who actually understand that come out of the pool of prospective board members and actually sit with the Board of Trustees. Now, I mentioned those two because I think those are the 2 most important ones, where the rector can have a lot of pull and do a lot of good. There are, of course, many others, but there's only 2 minutes, so I hope that'll do for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. It's great to see a first year getting so involved, and good luck with your own campaign. Well, the first thing I'd look at would be how relevant is the issue that's been brought forward. Is it brought by a faculty? Is it brought by a group? Is it brought by an individual? And based on that, I would go from there. Is the issue at hand something that would affect people other than the person who's bringing the issue? Is it as simple as dietary restrictions and they want to know who to talk to? And going through the proper channels is, of course, very important, because there are positions at Queen's. And once again, miscommunication is a big deal, because there are positions out there that exist to help students, but students don't know that they exist. So pointing them towards that position, towards those people. Gauging the student mood. You know, having speaker series, having public forums. Ahmed Casey, who was the rector in the early 2000s, used to write an op-ed in the journal every once in a while, and just basing the reaction on that. So I would go from basing it on how big the issue is, and then go through the channels from there. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We have another question from the floor.
Hello, candidates. My name is Safi Chaudhry. I am actually a student at large still. So my question's a bit lengthy, but I think it's important that you get all the details so you actually answer the question that I'm asking.
Could you do us a big favor and speak really loudly, Ben?
Okay, is this better?
The speakers aren't faced towards us. And
Oh, is this better? Really close. Okay. Okay, so looking through your platforms on your websites, I was frankly dismayed actually to see not much or any mention about issues regarding equity and anti-oppression in your platforms. This is a continual problem at Queen's that actually requires ongoing pressure, which a rector is excellently suited for, given the fact that it's a 2 or 3 year term and it is a liaison between the AMS and the SGPS. But your platforms don't actually make much or any mention, for some of you, any mention of this at all, which runs contrary, I would argue, to your mission to represent all students at Queen's. So how do you plan to A, outreach to students who feel disenfranchised at this university, and B, how do you plan to seek meaningful change at this university given that? And please speak broadly and avoid tokenizing any issues like mental health or any groups like international students. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the question. I just want to begin by saying that just because it's not on our platform doesn't mean we oppose it. So let's start with that. But I think education is a big thing, and I'm not talking about educating students. That's certainly part, but educating myself. I know that I don't know everything. I know that I can't know everything, but knowing the issues that are important to students and equity and diversity is certainly one of those. So educating myself and hooking up with the groups on campus who already have established a reputation for these causes and ensuring that they can tell me what needs to be done so that I can go out to the administration and get things changed. But more so that they can also tell me what I need to do as an individual to ensure that I properly represent these groups.
Thanks, Sophia, for the question. So for this issue in particular, I think it's very important to clarify that if I were rector or just as a student at large, it's important to understand that I can't know exactly what any student is going through in terms of oppression and how they experience that. I know I've had my own experiences at Queen's and I can understand a level of it, but I can't fully understand what they're going through whatever oppression matters are happening to them. Which I think what I'm getting at is it's important to go through a channel like the Social Issues Commission, which I think is well connected with a lot of the groups on campus to reach out to them and find out exactly what they feel is in need from the administration in terms of eliminating systemic oppression and as well as just improving the situation and also just having their voices heard. I've talked to a couple students during the campaign actually who are very passionate about this, and I think that's great that they have this passion, and I think some of it may not be necessarily because they're excited about it. It might just be because they really feel strongly about it, and I think that sometimes the rector could actually have some of these students speak to administration one-on-one if they feel comfortable with it, because you know what, I felt very touched by that student who was talking to me that day, and I think the administration would have a big impact if they talked to the students themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Safia. In reading through the other candidates' platforms, I was equally as dismayed to see that was not something that was addressed. It is a point that I decided to include in my platform because I do think it's really important. A lot of my experience within Queens has been actually through the Social Issues Commission. So I sat on Students Against Poverty, I was the chair of Students Against Poverty, I sat on the Education on Gender Issues Committee, I have had to step down from my role of the AMS and SGPS Food Center Director, but I will resume that shortly. So these are issues that are very important to me. Further, I am personally committed to educating myself every single day. And that is something that I have made a commitment not only for this role, but just for my life. So I did address issues of equity in my platform. Something that I think is important to note is that We've had reports done at our school before, people telling us exactly the problems that we have here and what we need to be doing to address them, and those concerns have not been adequately addressed. So what I would like to do as rector is work with bodies who are committed to addressing those concerns, like the Human Rights Office, like the Equity Office, like the SGPS and AMS respectively, to actually see those recommendations put into place. I want to put pressure on the administration to follow through on those recommendations that have been made so that we can make our campus safer for all students.
Sorry, before you actually start the time, just in the interest of equity, I was trying to write down your questions. Could I get you to repeat it? B, I shattered my wrist a few years ago, so since then I type my exams and things like that, so writing's a little difficult sometimes.
You just want B?
Yeah, just B. I couldn't write much more after A.
So how do you plan to seek meaningful change regarding equity at Queen's?
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I'll start. The reason I didn't mention specifically just continuing to advocate for measures that are already in place is because these measures are, one, already in place, and two, something that will already be advocated for, specifically by those who are currently doing it and by me as Queen's Rector acting on their behalf. I don't put it on the website because instead I want to talk about the things that I'm going to be doing differently from what's already going on. In regards to this specific issue, it falls under the section of my website where I deal with striking new committees to reach out to the diverse communities here at Queen's. There's a whole lot of different groups out there, and they're not being properly represented. Now, the rector is of course there to take complaints as they arise and deal with issues from these communities when they want to come forward. But that's not enough. The purpose of the committees I want to strike are to take a more proactive role, to get in there early, to keep tabs, and to keep a dialogue open between these communities and the rector's office. That way the rector can know what's going on before a serious problem arises. That way the rector can be in touch and know what's already happened and know the context of the latest issue to come forward. That's just the main thing I would be doing to help tackle these issues here on campus. Other ones that I mentioned earlier have to do with fighting to stop the cuts to disability services, which represents the invisible disabled students here on campus who are themselves an often overlooked community here at the school. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Safia. Excellent question. And I forgot to put it on my platform, but it will be up in a few hours. That's one of the things I did think about when I was considering running to be a rector. It's a funny word, rector, right? But that's one of the things I did think about. You know, I'm not white. I don't drink. How would that be? How would the student population respond to that? I've been refused haircuts out in the Kingston community. People have just refused to serve me, and I've had to wait until someone else was comfortable, you know, cutting my hair. You know, go ahead and do that. And the way we go about with equity is we've got so many great groups around campus which are marginalized because and they don't go out to vote because there's nothing in it for them in these elections. I'm talking about groups like OPER. I'm talking about groups like Livana, you know, Gender Advocacy Center, Helping Hands, the Pride Project, QCRED. So working with them, you know, powwow, working with them and seeing what they want, what are their concerns, how can I help them, how can I lobby for them, what issues are at their forefront, and what do they want, how can I help? Because equity is a problem. It really is. That's why everyone has equity training. Every faculty has an equity officer. The most high profile one is the ASIS equity officer generally, and it would be in the best interest of the rector to have some equity training even. So working with pre-existing groups, of course it's out there already. That doesn't mean you don't help out. And I think you're absolutely right in saying that it is one of the things that the rector should stand for. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Safia, for the question. So I just wanted to address the platform first of all. My platform actually doesn't address any particular issues, and it's for this reason exactly, because I don't think that I don't think that I have the capability to say these are the issues that are important to me. So instead, my platform is my approach to how I'm going to address issues that are important to students, as well as I talk about the different key challenges and opportunities in the coming year. So that's why it wasn't particularly in my platform express, is because I talk about the approaches that I'm going to use to issues like this that are important to students. And this is one of the issues I think is extremely important. And working with last year within ASIS, really trying to revamp the equity office was a huge part of my platform with Doug, who was the president that year as well. So we really tried to make that office a legitimate office and not a tokenized office that was just implemented for reasons that many of you are aware of. So I think that part of this discussion has been, I think it's the same kind of thing with mental health, is we're focusing on the services that are available to these students, and we're treating them as if, okay, you're different, you feel marginalized, go get this service, and that's it. And instead, we should be focusing on, like I mentioned in the FICSA assembly the other day, the systemic reasons for why students are feeling marginalized. We shouldn't just say, okay, you're feeling marginalized, but this guy isn't, so you go seek this service. No one should ever feel marginalized on this campus, and I think that understanding why students are feeling that way is critically important, and trying to tackle the reasons why they're feeling that way. So a lot of the different reports have come up with this, and I think that the rector, as a representative of all students, can really understand the ways in which different groups on campus are feeling marginalized, because they represent all those students. They have the ability to talk to these groups and realize that students are affected in different ways. They're affected depending on the particular group that they're in, and the rector can go forth and try and determine what those reasons are and the ways that we can ensure that students aren't feeling this way, and that they're not just made to feel like they just go to the service and everything's fine.
All right, thank you. We now have a question from Twitter from Rico Garcia. It's a hypothetical. All right, we have a rebuttal. Sorry, we'll proceed with that, Mr. Chisty.
Just to talk about Robin's point, some of these services which do exist are phenomenal. You know, these marginalized students, and some of them aren't marginalized. They go out of their way. You know, they put up with a lot of flack to provide a service to marginalized groups. You know, some of them suffer because they're trying to help out, because of this stigma that exists here at Queen's. And they try to provide equity, and the rector can't, it's one person, you can't deal with everyone, which is why these services exist, and you direct them towards these services and help as best as you can. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another rebuttal from Ms. Lang.
Thanks for addressing that. I want to make it clear that I wasn't trying to diminish the work that the services do. And one of the things I also wanted to point out was that things like what David said, disabled students. I think that education is key. And Queen's Invisibilities, for example, did a Person First campaign, which hopefully a lot of you saw, but to address people as students with a disability, not a disabled student. So I think education and these services are critically important. So I didn't want to diminish that.
All right, so as I was saying, we have a question from Rico Garcia. It was a tweet. It is a hypothetical situation. The provost is concerned about the current budget and mentions that cuts need to be applied somewhere. He asked for your input and wants to know what you would do. So again, starting with Mr. Francis, go ahead.
All right, thanks Rico for the question. Sorry, so it was the provost is going to make cuts and he's asking for recommendations.
The provost is concerned and cuts need to be made. He's asking for your recommendations.
Okay, well, I actually read through the financial update this summer, which was quite extensive, but there are a lot of changes that are about to happen in this university financially, and the real thing is that there are cuts going to be made. The provost is planning on balancing the books by the end of the year. This was said at the Board of Trustees meeting in late September. And I think what the rector needs to do is actually, as the decisions are being planned out, the rector needs to look at each decision and think and ask the question, how is this going to impact each group of students? How is this going to impact each individual student? and then take the knowledge and take the information gathered from analyzing the plan, and then give that to students, and obviously as much as can be given, and say, listen, these are some of the decisions, these are some of the plans that might be taking place. How do you feel about this? Do you think that there's a better way we can do this? And really bringing that student input back into it. So I think that is somewhat of a hypothetical situation, but also very real and could happen this year. Thank you.
If the provost was concerned about the budget and he asked me what I would do, I would say talk to the students about what they want, what they think is important. And I think this is going to go back to my communication strategy that I answered to Amanda's question earlier. But just start with posing a question at the different governing bodies. So pose a question at AMS Assembly. Say, you know, what's important to you, what's not important to you. Pose a question at council, SGBS Council, sorry. And all of those bodies, and go through that that forum to get that information. Also, to go to Res and say, hey, you guys are going to be here for the next 4 years. You know, you have a lot of stake in what's going to happen at this school. What do you want to see here? What's important to you? What is okay for us to cut? Where should we be cutting? And I think that that is the most important thing, is to never say, here's my opinion on what I think we should be cutting, but rather say, you know, it's not up to me to decide what's important and what's not important here. It's up to the students who are going to be using the services.
Before we go straight to cuts, I think what we should first be looking at are alternative sources for revenue and alternative sources we could cut from. For example, Queen's bands didn't have it in the budget to go and march in the Calgary Stampede for the summer of 2012. They put together a direct donations campaign targeting alumni. They're going. They've raised the money, and in 2012, Queen's is going to be represented in Calgary. The Rector is well positioned to stand as the main representative of the students and can go forward and lobby the government to increase the per-student subsidy. We could try to increase some wall advertising, or just make better use of the advertising space that already exists and is already set up, but is left blank. We have huge empty spaces downstairs in the Queen Center. We need to rent these places out effectively. From what I'm told, the AMS already has something lined up. But here's the question. How much money are we losing by just leaving it open and bare right now? Queen students are very creative. We've been very good at coming up with all kinds of ways to increase some revenue. The PNCC has started a scrapbook business. They take scrap paper with one side that's still fun, and they cut it up and turn it into a scrapbook that they can sell. We need to do more things like that. We need to make more smart environmental decisions. The rooms in this building have motion-sensitive lights. If nobody's in it for a while, they shut off. Queen's is saving a whole lot of money by not having a huge drain on our power resources simply by people leaving the lights on. We need to make more creative decisions like this.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent question, Rico. He's always making trouble. The first thing I would do if the rector talked to me about budget cuts would, one of the things for those of you who don't know, whoever gets elected to be rector gets their tuition paid for. The first thing I would say is don't pay my tuition. I'll cover it. That would be step one. And like Nick mentioned already, by the end of the year, for the first time in a really long time, Queen's University does have to balance its books. What I would do is make sure that the entire process was as transparent as possible. There's a reason why the rector is a student. You're sitting on the other side of the table with the admin, but you're a student. And student interest should be at your heart, which is why I would make the process as transparent as possible. Communication would be big, but so would be facilitating communication, making sure you reached out to everyone you could. One of the things that Rico Garcia, Duncan Peterson, Derek Dodson, and a bunch of other people mentioned was that there's a real lack of communication between the rector's office and student leaders, at least recently. And they don't know what's going on at the upper admin level stuff. Which is why communication would be huge, transparency would be huge, and just getting student response. How do students feel about this? Who does it affect? How does it affect? Yes, that's it, transparency. That's how I would go about this. Thank you.
All right, so thanks, Rico. I think that it's important to understand that the provost is definitely very right in thinking that budget cuts are a huge concern right now. So in 2009, it's my understanding the board mandated 15% cut across all units. So depending on the faculty you're part of, they decided how to distribute that throughout the year. So most of them chose 5% each year. Some of them chose 3%, then 5%, then 7%, meaning that this upcoming year is the hardest cut that they're going to have to make. The Faculty of Arts and Science, luckily, they are taking their cuts from the faculty office itself, and there will be no cuts to individual departments. So they've worked really hard to ensure that their budget is set up in such a way that in this hardest year of budget cuts, they can take it all off from the faculty office. I think that's something that's really important to look at is our overhead and things that don't directly impact students. And I also think that thinking of it in terms of what should we cut isn't the best idea either. I think that we need to be looking at what can we change. So, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of creative ways to do this. Satellite campuses are something that I'm a big fan of. Giving students international opportunities, things like maximizing your purchasing power by going with a single provider. All these kinds of things where we can really cut back on our overhead expenditures, and within the faculty offices themselves, I think is a lot. UFT, for example, they put a cap on their senior administration. And I think that looking at other universities and how they're handling this, because we're all facing budget cuts, is something that the provost should look into as well.
I think this was mentioned before, but I completely agree with it. Cuts are not the first option we should be looking at. That said, that's not Rico's question, so I will entertain it and say if something has to be cut, it's going to be classrooms. And what I mean by that is that I really like to shift to having options between having some classrooms and having some online versions of classes. I've said before, if there's 3 sections of a class, offer one online. I believe it bans therefore. I mean, obviously you can't do it with every class, but you can do it for some. And if that's what we're going to cut, I say cut the classroom time for the classes where it's demanded to be online.
All right, thank you. We have another question from Twitter as well from a Timothy Hutama. The question is, a culture of alcohol consumption surrounds Queen's University. What would you do to promote responsible drinking? Starting with Ms. Stairs.
Thank you. This is actually a really good question and something that I'm really happy that came up. I actually choose not to drink. So I definitely notice the culture of drinking that happens at this school. You know, whether it's like just hanging out with my friends and then being like, yeah, let's just go get wasted. And I'm like, that's not really going to be fun for me. So these are things that I definitely notice. It's also difficult sometimes to participate in certain student activities. So for instance, when I was in second year, I participated in the News Orientation Week. And most faculty societies' orientation weeks have an event that is not necessarily sanctioned, but it happens anyway, where students are encouraged to drink excessively together. And that was not something that I was able to participate in because I choose not to drink. So things that I would do to start with is actually starting with orientation week and working with those leaders and ensuring that Gales and Frex and teaches and bosses, they're not encouraging this to happen, because that starts the precedent for what happens throughout the rest of the year. So I think that's the first place that I would start. I would also work with both student government associations, because participating in the AMS a lot, I've noticed that, for instance, hiring night happens at QP, you buy people drinks. Like, I don't think that's okay, and I think that's something that we should work towards changing, so that our social events are not geared around alcohol, but rather geared around events that everyone can participate in.
Drinking isn't just a problem that we have here at Queen's. This happens at universities across the country. People are unsupervised for the first time. They want to do what their parents were never letting them do all the time they were staying at home. So they let loose. What we need to do is not encourage it. What we need to do is educate new students who come to this school so that they know how to do it responsibly and safely. I remember when I came here in first year, getting a little card that would give you some instructions in the event you found someone passed out. For some reason that was the front of the card, and then on the back were instructions on how not to reach that stage. It'd probably be a good idea to actually reverse those two, but anyway. Other things that we've done to try to discourage excessive drinking is we've made Frosh Week dry, and we've removed alcohol references from the We Got Spirit song. What's left to do is to continue to promote responsibility in this area. Health Services has been doing a great job of this. We need to build on those successes. We need to put posters back out there that educate students on this issue and let them know how to make smart, responsible, and healthy choices for themselves. Thank you for the question, Twitter.
Excellent question. Timothy Utuma, for those of you who don't know, is a first-year student, which is why this question is especially even more relevant. We've seen the administrative response to drinking. We've seen that they said Frosh Week is going to be dry, and they moved the problem outside of residences. We've seen how the Dons wanted to talk about it, and their response in saying, is it okay for students to be drinking off campus? We've got safer environments here on campus, you know, where if they're in trouble, we can help out right away. So we've seen what the administration wants to do about drinking. But what do you really do about drinking at Queen's when you've got QP, which is at the heart of the J-Duck, Alfie's, which is right next door, Clark Hall Pub, which is right on campus. There's definitely a culture of drinking that exists here. You know, at AMS after the assembly, guys, let's head over to QP. When the speaker is often asked to tell where they met potential candidates, such as speakers or rectors, a lot of the responses are, at places where you drink. And that's okay, I think, because drinking socially is okay, but the problem is when it becomes over excessive, when it becomes a culture. There are certain frosh groups, like a Freck group that I can think of right off the top of my head, in which one of the Frecks doesn't drink at all, and one of them drinks a lot. So they're thinking about their Wreck the Freck, and they're thinking about how do we plan that. One of them saying, hey, it's traditional, you know how it was last year, let's just continue it. Our frosh can take care of us if we get wrecked, and same thing goes for Gale families when they have their slosh the frosh. So there is definitely a culture that exists, Timothy. I don't know how we can solve that. I think it begins with awareness that you don't have to drink to have fun. You don't have to drink to socialize. And that's where we start making a step. But I think it begins with the AMS and certain groups like that saying that it's okay, you don't have to drink to be a part of our culture. And for the most part, even though people feel left out, it is a very inclusive atmosphere. Thank you.
All right, thanks for the question. I think that is a really big problem at Queen's and in every university in Canada. I know that last year when I worked as Vice President of the Arts and Science Undergraduate Society, first I was Marketing Commissioner, and I don't drink a lot. I go out and I drink socially, I go to QP after assembly, but I don't drink excessively, and I was extremely nervous once I was hired, we had to go on transition weekend, and I was so nervous because I didn't know how I would be treated, I didn't know what I would have to do, and I was terrified. And the next year when I became Vice President, I made it my mission, along with Doug, who was the President, that we would take drinking out of our transition weekend and show our commissioners that there are things to do that don't involve drinking. And I think that that's something that the Rector can do, is look at every organization, look at what they do after they hire their volunteers, after they hire their commissioners, and look at the ways that they promote solidarity amongst themselves that doesn't involve alcohol, or if it does, how they can make it not involve alcohol. And I think that was one of the ways that really enlightened me to the fact that students don't all, we were worried that our commissioners might say, oh, okay, this isn't as fun, there's not alcohol involved, but they didn't, because we made it so. And I think that that's something that every organization here needs to look at, as well as I think we need to eliminate the stigma around alcohol. So during Frosh Week, we're not allowed to talk about it at all. I was in Yale, and I wasn't allowed to even mention the word alcohol, and I think that made it worse. We know that that doesn't work with things like sexual education. If you don't say anything about it, it becomes stigmatized, and I just think that it's far worse, and I don't understand why it's different with alcohol. But I think that rather than ignoring the problem, we should educate students about it, and we should be allowed to speak about it in Frosh Week.
I think the first thing to do is address and acknowledge that there is a culture of drinking on campus. And that doesn't just exist within the student government aspect of this campus, and that it's across campus, and for the most part it encompasses campus. I think it continues though with removing the pressure, removing the pressure to drink. And I think you do that by providing alternatives to different traditions on campus or things that people do involving alcohol. And you continue again by promoting the ones that already exist. I think that the substance-free social club, for example, is an amazing one. One where they go out and they go rock climbing, they do karaoke nights, they have movie night, and it's designed so that there is no substances there. And so going out and making sure that students are aware that those alternatives exist, and where those alternatives don't exist, going out and creating them. That's the way to do it.
Thanks for the question. I think that every student should have the choice whether or not to partake in drinking or not, and I think they should feel comfortable with that choice and not have to feel that they're being pressured to do either one. And I think working with a group like the Alcohol Working Group on education is a very good idea. I know that everyone's touched on it so far, but it is really important that students understand exactly how alcohol can affect you in the long term and how it can affect your studies. I think if students really understood that, it would change their perception on the drinking culture. As well, encouraging clubs to be respectful to all students in terms of this. I know that when I first got here, I was a part of Queen's Model Parliament, and one of the very first events I went to was the All Leaders debate, which was held in Alfie's, and you had no choice, it was only in Alfie's. And a lot of people were drinking, and that was just the culture of it. The next year I went back, and they actually had changed it so that there was a debate beforehand for an hour in the JDUC where there was no drinking, it was very serious, and then there was the optional debate afterwards in Alfie's. Things like this are really great, they're respectful to both sides of the issue. And quickly touching on Frosh Week and the decisions that were made around that, I think we've gone from one extreme to the other. I'm not entirely sure if restricting students when they get to a place where they should be free to learn and have the resources around them to help them is such a good idea. Thank you.
All right, so this will be our last question of the evening. So it is another question from Twitter. The identity of the asker was not written down, so it's an anonymous Twitter question. What do you feel is the most common or a common misconception or misunderstanding about the rector position? Starting with Mr. Myers.
It's a pretty good question, actually. Good note to end the evening. The most common misconception about the role probably stems from a lack of understanding just as to where the rector is going to advocate for students. This isn't an advocacy position that's being held with other students within the AMS or the SGPS. This is a position where you're dealing with professionals who have gone out, many of them graduating from Queen's, and then gone out into the world, struck out as professionals, and now they're coming back to help administrate this university. They need to know that someone is on their level. They need to know that they are dealing with a serious professional face on behalf of students of this university. The reason this probably gets lost in translation so much to the student body at large is that students expect that when they hear student representative, they simply think of mainstream student representation. That is, those institutions that already exist. They don't know about the Board of Trustees. They don't know about how relevant their decisions are in the lives of students of this university. What we can do to change that is have the rector be more transparent, be more open, and be more accountable, thus making the position relevant in a very significant and immediate way to the lives of students, who will then become better aware of just what the position is there to fulfill. That is representation of students to non-students. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for the question, anonymous person. If there's one thing we can thank Nick Day for, and he's the white elephant in this room, if there's one thing we can thank him for, it's that people now know more than ever that the rector position exists. And those who do don't know what the rector does. And that's because there is no job description. Traditionally, the rector has done a few things. He's spoken at orientation. He's spoken at convocation. He's, shaking everyone's hand at all the graduates. He's spoken at Remembrance Day. He's represented the students at the Board of Trustees. And he's facilitated discussions between AMS and SGPS. But what else? What is the job description? It's so vague. And that's something every candidate here realizes, that the position is open to interpretation. It can be molded as the person who's elected sees fit. Other misconceptions, maybe not misconception, but other questions that people have are, where is the rector's office? That's one of the questions people ask. So the biggest misconception would be, what does the rector do? Thank you.
All right, thanks for the question. I think this is very hard to answer, actually. I think it depends on the year, frankly. I think it depends on what the rector did the previous year, and that strongly influences what students feel about it. When I was collecting my 800 signatures, either when I said, do you know what the rector is, people said no, or they said, is that the Nick Day thing? So it really depends on what the year is, on what students are aware of, and I think that one of the misconceptions could be that the rector is seen as a miracle worker, that if an issue comes up, that the rector has all these different channels that they can go through and that they can enact change. So they can, but they can't just do everything, and I think that's a misconception depending on what year you were. Or the fact that the rector doesn't have a job description and that it should. I think that the fact that the rector position is very open and very fluid and depends on the individual in it is actually an advantage to the position, because I think that it allows them to really address issues that come up at any time. And they're not attached within any one student organization. So I don't know, I think there's a lot of different misconceptions because of the nature of the position, and I don't even think that they necessarily are misconceptions because it's such a dynamic position. I don't really know if I answered the question, so I apologize.
That's actually a really good question. It took me a while to think about my answer. But I think the biggest misconception is that the rector is removed from the students, that the distance between a regular student and the rector is huge, and that there's a couple levels to get through, and that's not the case. A lot of people don't know where the rector's office is, as Assad said. It's located in the JDOC. It's not in an administrative building. It's within a building that is surrounded by students, that is run by students, and that was built by students. And so that's an important thing. And you also have to recognize that in order to become the rector, you have to be a student. So you're a student first, you're not the rector first.
All right, thank you for the question. Sorry, Mike. So this misconception of the rector is very familiar. I had been trying to figure out exactly what the rector is and how the role can be the most effective. And the most common misconception that I've heard when telling students what the rector is they say, so they're the president of the school, the senior representative, so they can just make changes as they see fit. And that's not exactly how the rector actually works. Basically, how I understand it is that there are systems of representation that have been built over a long period of time here at Queen's, and there's a long tradition of student involvement. So basically, you've got, starting from the DSCs, through the faculty societies, to the AMS, to the SGPS, and then finally the rector is that last point of contact in between the administration as well as the students. So I think that is the biggest misconception of the position, And it's not that they're not the president of the AMS or the SGPS where they have the guns of a huge budget and commissioners underneath them, lots of services. They're not able to command change on the university level, but they're able to motivate change on the university level. Thank you.
So I'm not sure if this is necessarily a misconception with the rector role, but I do think it is a big problem, and that's the idea that it is so undefined and the rector can just kind of advocate on whatever they see fit. I did identify this as a large problem when I was considering running for this position, and that's why I made my platform so clear and so, I guess, just honest. Like, I laid out my platform so that students would know exactly what is important to me and exactly what I intend to advocate for. So I think that it's important for the rector to have that in mind, but also to communicate that really well to students, because I think it's not necessarily, I just don't think it's honest to say that you're going to come into this position and say, I'm just going to say whatever you want me to say, because that's not recognizing the inherent biases that we all have. And I think that's a necessary thing to recognize, so that when you are electing the rector to the role, you're saying, okay, I recognize what your biases are, and I think that there are also things that affect me, and that's why I want to vote for you. So voting for people based on what they bring to the table and not what they think they're going to bring to the table afterwards.
All right, thank you. We have a rebuttal from Mr. Myers.
I just wanted to speak quickly on the issue of vagueness of the position. This is something I've thought is a real problem, and it's why part of my platform includes, at the forefront, a constitution for the rector. This is something where, if elected, I would generate this very early on, and I would submit it to the AMS and SGPS for their ratification. This isn't just a removal document. Something similar to that has already been passed. This is something to better outline the duties and responsibilities of the office and provide clear action that can be taken against the rector if they are not fulfilling their job. What I would hope to do is make sure that the rector has a better place within the Queen's community, and a clear one at that. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, so as I stated, that was the last question of the evening, and that marks the end of the forum. So now the candidates are going to be allowed a 3-minute closing statement. Just to change up this a little bit, we're going to go in a reverse order from the openings. So we're going to start on this end with Ms. Stairs and work our way across to Mr. Myers. So they have 3 minutes. Again, please hold all applause to the end. Go ahead, Ms. Stairs.
One of the roles of the rector that I see as being very important is the idea of the role, as the rector, as a symbol of the Queen's administration's commitment and respect to student opinions. I think what we have seen recently is that when students are given the opportunity to voice their opinions, they are very capable of articulating exactly what they want and exactly what they need. If I'm elected rector, I am fully committed to providing every forum possible for students to articulate their needs and taking those to the administration. I would thoroughly encourage each and every one of you to read through my platform, because as I said in my statement, I'm really just trying to be honest about what I'm all about. And I want you to vote for me if you think that what I'm all about is the person that you want to represent you. If you think that mental health is important, if you think that the quality of our education is important, if you think that financial accessibility is important, sustainability is important, equity and diversity is important, if you think alumni relations are important, and you think that the way that I have outlined addressing them is important, then I think that's why you should vote for me. The other thing that I wanted to stress is that when I wrote my platform, it wasn't me just sitting at my computer being like, I think this might be a cool idea. Every day that I'm at Queen's, I'm here engaging with the people around me, talking to student leaders, reading the journal, talking to groups that have been mentioned here already. I have very close relationships with a lot of different groups on campus, like OPERT, like Levana, like like groups like that. And I I worked with people to come up with these ideas and to come up with this vision for this role and to lay out exactly what I think is going to happen, or what I would like to see happen, or what I think the rector should be doing. So yes, if you would like to read through my platform, it's available at www.votelora.com. And yes, if you have any questions, anything else that I didn't address fully here, or anything that you think I should be talking about that I'm not talking about, I would absolutely love to talk to each and every one of you about any issue at Queen's. So you can email me at 8les1@queensu.ca. You can talk to me on Twitter, Laura Stairs, or you can follow me or friend me on Facebook, because I would genuinely like to address any concern that you have.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight and asking questions, being engaged. It really shows that there are groups of students on campus who really do care what happens to the university, whether they're first year, fourth year, or in graduate school. So essentially right now, our school is in dire need of a positive voice, in my opinion. There's a lot of things happening, there's a lot of things changing, and the rector can be that positive voice on campus. Traditions are being stripped away without having anything replaced to replace them with. That's put on my platform. I encourage you to check it out. There's lots of different things that need to change in this university, and there are a lot of restrictions on us. If you guys want to find out more about me and my platform, I encourage you to visit votefrancis.com. And as it's been said many times tonight, the rector position is really molded by the individual. So I really encourage you to come out to all of our vote times and speak to us individually if you really care about the representation at your school. And yeah, so anyways, I'm trailing on. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say thanks to you guys too. It's been a late night. We're in the middle of midterms. It takes a lot to come out here. But I also want to say that I'm Mike. I haven't heard my name in a while. Maybe you guys forgot who I am. But a lot of questions got asked tonight. The questions that weren't answered in our platform or weren't addressed in our platforms. So I encourage you to check ours out if you haven't already. Mine's at mikerector.com. But a quick recap. I want increased mental health resources available on campus. I want a rector who will unite the campus and will act as a mediator for parties that will ask for it. I want a visible rector, a rector who goes down to the students and actively engages with them, and that they can identify who the rector is. I want to be able to have a rector who communicates to students, so building the website's a good start, that's not the end. And being able to convey the decisions made in the administration to the students in a form that's quick and easy so that they don't have to go out and read a 100-page document, and that they can continue on with their studies like they're supposed to. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll try and keep this short. So thank you all again for coming out tonight. I know that it is very difficult to come out to these things. Everything always seems to happen all at once here. But again, my name's Robin. I'm running for this position because I'm truly passionate about Queen's, about our education, and about the uniqueness of our institution. And I want to make sure that we maintain the same quality and that same uniqueness in light of challenges that we're facing in the coming years. And I think that I have the experience to do that, and I think that I have the ability to ensure that things that are important to us are not lost, and that things that are important to us actually happen and are improved upon. As rector, I'd like to advocate on behalf of students, on behalf of every student, and within every department, within every program, and I'd like to unite our shared potential. So I think we have a lot of pre-existing bodies that we can really bring together to make sure that our student voice is as strong as it can be. The administration cannot ignore us. Not to say that they ever would, but that it needs to be as strong as possible. And I would like to unite all the different groups on campus. And I think that we really do have the ability to change Queens. I know this because I've done it. I know that each one of you have done it in your own way. And we really do have that opportunity and that responsibility to shape it for ourselves and for future Queen's students. So I hope that you think about that when you're voting, and remember that it's preferential, so check out all of our platforms. Voting's next week. Thank you for your time again.
Thank you everyone for coming out. People talk a lot about voter disengagement, and I don't believe that it's true necessary. Voter disengagement might be true, but student disengagement is not. Everyone here at Queen's is involved in one way or another, even if that means lining up for ritual Friday after classes. Everyone is involved in one way or another. So thank you for those of you who are here. Thank you for those of you who've live streamed. Thank you for those of you who've been tweeting. Thank you for the alumni who've been tweeting, like Sean Abraham. Why I'm running for rector? I'm here because I'm worried about the voices which are lost at university. I'm worried about the individuals who come to university, find their voices lost, as the administration talks about big issues which are relevant, which are important, but the individuals who comprise this university are too easily lost. And I'd like to be there for them. That's why I'm here. The platform that I stand on, the platform that I stand for, is the one that's going to be given by you. I know there are issues that I'm thinking about in the back of my head, but what do you want? If you elect me, I'm here for you, so tell me what you want. The position of rector is one of great potential, one of great influence, but it's not one of great power. The university is massive. It takes a while to get the cogs to move, but I think we are at a crossroads where we have to choose between atrophy or whether we need a renaissance. You know, we need to start thinking about what's next. Budget cuts, but to what end? What happens next? What happens when you can't make any cuts? So I would like to encourage all of you all to come out and vote. You don't have to vote for me, but just come out and vote. Please do that. Check out the other candidates' platforms. We're all phenomenal people. Well, maybe not me, but everyone else is. And please come out and vote. Thank you.
I made the decision to run for rector because when I returned home to Queens, I was worried about some of the changes I'd seen taking place here. I made the decision to run for rector because I want to help restore Queens. I want to help restore accountability to the office of the rectorship. I want to help restore the quality of the Queen's name. I want to help restore our community's health, safety, and respect. You can explore my platform fully at queensrector.ca. But right now I'm going to tell you that I know I can be a positive and strong source for change as rector. I'm already an accessible and strong advocate, so much so that this past summer I was representing politics students who were having a fight with the administration. I'm a professional face that the Board of Trustees will take seriously, one that they can't ignore when I come forward with issues about this student community. I know this university. I know the spirit of this student body. I know what we can achieve when we set our minds to it. I know that we can come back from this. I know that we can get better. I know that I can help us get better, and I know that it's going to start now. I know that this is something we can get done. And I hope all of you will join me in the move to restore Queens to the quality with which its name has always been synonymous on October 25th and 26th. Vote David Myers for rector, and let's restore this university together. Thank you very much.
Right, a round of applause for all the candidates. So yes, that does mark the end of this rector election debate. So first of all, I'd just like to thank, all the candidates for taking time out of their busy campaign to be here, as well as to thank each and every one of you for coming out. Thank you to all the people who submitted questions, those that have been following along that weren't able to make it out and watching the live stream. So you've heard this information a couple times before, but I'd just like to reiterate, yes, the campaign period will be closing next Monday, voting taking place on October 25th and 26th, which is Tuesday and Wednesday. You will receive an email in your Queen's email, whether you're an SGPS member or an AMS member, you will receive a voting link there. So yes, be informed, make sure that you vote. As was stated, it is preferential balloting, so you will have a chance to rank the candidates. If you do have any questions about the election procedures, you are able to contact the Rector Elections team, which does have members from both the AMS and the SGPS. So our information is posted available on both of those websites. So once again, just thank you everybody for coming out. It is a not so great night out, so thank you for braving the weather and coming out. Have a good night everybody, and don't forget to vote.